Okay, what is our topic today? Hey, we're going to be talking about generational farms and that whole process of passing down the family farm, the family business to the next generation, and what kind of interesting complications there are from that and what happens when it doesn't happen. My guest today is Dave Specht. Did I get that right?
Specht, but I've been called a lot of bad things, so.
Oh, I bet you have. Dave Specht. Well, Dave has written a book, and of course, wouldn't you know, Dave, I left it on my kitchen table. Oh, you got one too. All right, good. And it's called The Farm Whisperer. And basically, it's secrets to preserving the family and perpetuating farms. All right. Let me start with the fact that I did a little research that I shared with you on the internet, our new encyclopedia that is so easy to get to, and I learned that 93% of the farms in the United States right now, 93% are family owned, are family farms. So what do we expect to change? Do we in the next 10 to 20 years? Is that 93% gonna change?
You know, it's a great question. I don't really believe it's going to change, but because of the demographics of the owners of these farms, the average age of the farm owner these days is 59 years old. And so we're seeing an enormous wave of both ownership transition, but also management transition. And these farms transition in many different ways, Christine. They transition many times within the family if there is an interested next generation. I would say interested and capable next generation. Sometimes they go into trust and get managed by someone that is not a family member, but they stay owned by the family. And many times it passes a generation like that, and maybe it's the grandkids that end up having interest, they end up coming back on the farm. So it's tricky. There's so many different ways that a farm transitions, but I don't see the end of the family farm coming anytime soon. And I think in popular media it's out there that that the family farm is something of the past, but I just do not believe that.
Oh, well, I hope not. Oh, especially because our area is so dependent upon farming for our economy, and yeah, we need the family farm. So what is the difference between a family farm and large corporate farming?
Great, another great question. The term corporate farm can mean a lot of different things, first of all. For me, if you asked 5 people that question, 5 people would probably give you a different answer. And so many family farms are owned in a corporate structure. Mm-hmm. So they may be owned as an LLC, or they may be owned as an S corporation, or some other form of entity that would, I guess, technically call them a corporate farm. So, that question is hard to answer. But as farms go, 88% of U.S. farms are small family farms, which would be considered $350,000 or less in revenue would be considered a small family farm. And so when we look at agriculture, it's still dominated by the small family farm.
Mm-hmm. All right. Well, did you grow up at a farm?
I was a farm kid from San Diego.
And what does that mean? What were you farming?
Let me explain. I had 2 4-H
seashells?
I had 2 4-H pigs, and we lived on 2.5 acres.
Oh, okay.
I thought that meant I was a farmer.
Yeah.
But then, I moved to Nebraska, and the good people of Nebraska helped me to understand that didn't really count. I wasn't really a farmer. So, my wife did grow up on a farm in Basin City, Washington, and so.
So now you live in Basin City.
Yep, we live in Basin City.
Yeah. And you have 5 children.
5 small children, yep.
And what is your actual background training? Isn't it, it's finances, isn't it? And economics?
Correct. I actually taught at the University of Nebraska and developed their family business management course. And before that, my training was in finance and tax planning. And as I was beginning as a consultant, I had all these strategies for families, and I would tell them what they should do, and guess what, Christine? They weren't doing what I was telling them to do. And I learned early that it was more important to ask the right questions than to have all the right answers for these people, and so it really kind of changed the way I advise families.
That sounds like an interesting strategy that can be used in so many different ways, because isn't that generally what happens to us? We go in and we meet with a consultant about whatever the topic is, whatever we're looking for, and the consultant sort of spoon feeds us, this is what you need to do. And there isn't necessarily the buy-in or the understanding, or sometimes our needs aren't met. So, interesting to me, you put together this strategy that calls for inspired questions. So what does that mean?
So, first of all, I'm working with A-type personalities who are resilient, who have gone through a lot of tough things. They've had to make tough decisions every single day, whether it's a family farm or a family business. And to assume that anyone is going to go in and tell them what to do is just a bad assumption. And so ultimately an inspired question is one that requires open sharing. It's not a yes/no question, and the answer can even evolve over time. And ultimately that's the key to getting these family operations from one generation to the next, is to ask some of these questions within the senior generation, or also to ask some of these questions to the next generation so that they can express what's really important to them. And also, it creates an environment where they can ask questions themselves. And too often I'm seeing estate plans created in secrecy. And I think it's maybe a generational thing where, you know, the controlling owner feels like, well, this is something I built, and you know, I'm going to control the information as well. And that's one thing I'd like to eradicate as a part of my career, is to eradicate the secret estate plan, because it just destroys families and really wreaks havoc on businesses. That's
interesting. Give me an example. What do you mean?
So I have a family friend back in California that has a specialty auto company, and Dad had a massive heart attack and passed away. He didn't share his intent with his son, who was really in charge of all the business development, or his daughter, who was a receptionist, or really even with his wife, who was keeping the books. It was a very typical small family business. 6 weeks later, after they bury Dad, son comes in on a Friday afternoon and quits, says I'm done, and moves 2 blocks to the west, opens a competing shop, and basically takes the clients of the business. And you know, so why did that happen? That was not the intent of Grandpa. I'm sure it wasn't. But now there's no relationships between Grandma and the kids on that other side of the family, and so.
Okay, well, what did the patriarch of that family want to have happen? What was his intent? Nothing? You mean he passed away and he had no plan, or what? He
had a plan that he set up with the attorney, but he didn't share those plans with the family before he died. And so the backstory behind what he actually wanted to accomplish, he took that to the grave with him. You know, whether he thought that Mom was going to share her half of the business with son and make it equal, or whether he did it that way so that he could protect daughter, nobody knows. And he took that information with him to the grave, so there were hurt feelings, and families were affected, and a business, you know, one business was pretty much destroyed.
That's a very, very, boy, you're just talking about some, there's money obviously involved, but the whole relationship of families, which actually, you know, bubbles up to be more important than the money part, is very complicated, very intertwined. We've got to take a break right here, but we'll be back to talk more about this, and we'll take a look at what Dave thinks is the biggest threat to family farms being passed down to the next generations. December 8th, my guest is Dave or David Specht. Do you want to be Dave or David?
I'll be Dave.
Okay, Dave. Dave is Dave is the author of the book, The Farm Whisperer: Secrets to Preserving Families and Perpetuating Farms. You're very involved in working with families about generational transition, is how you call it. You know, one of the things that you're going to be involved in, if people want to meet you and learn more about this, you'll be involved in a panel discussion at the Ag Expo, January 5th, 10 a.m., and that's at Track, right?
Yes.
What will you be discussing during that panel? Do you know?
Yeah, we're going to be talking about some of the specific issues with generational transition. One topic is compensation. How do you have the conversation about compensation with the next generation? Another one is, some of the issues with shared ownership, and is shared ownership something that your family should pursue? Is it the right thing for your next generation? So there'll be lots of topics, but it's basically panelists that are living the challenge of a generational farm transition.
Mm-hmm. I want to talk about some of those things, but let me go back to a basic and help me understand why we need family farms.
Why we need family farms?
Yeah.
Ultimately, I look at, first of all, my co-authors, my wife, Tennille Specht. It's her birthday today, so happy birthday.
Oh, that's nice.
I look at who she's become and the person that she is, and I think a lot of that is due to her being raised on a family farm. And that may not have been the answer you were necessarily looking for, but I think there's a generation of young Americans that will be the leaders in our country, and I think part of who they become is where they are raised, and the opportunity to be raised learning how to care for the land, how to be a steward, how to interact with the public early, whether it's at a farmer's market or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the skills that are learned by being a part of a family farm is just one reason, but I think it's an important one.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that families are more concerned about conserving the land and taking care of the land than corporate groups are? Corporate is not the right word. What is the word that I want? That is like a farm that is operated not from a family structure but from a boardroom structure.
Yeah, you can say corporate.
Okay.
It's fine. I like to know that the people that I'm buying food from want their land to be cared for, because their next generation is going to farm that same land. And if they're depleting it, deteriorating it, using it in a way that isn't the best for the land, I don't think we're going to see family farms do that, because the whole purpose of almost all family farms is to allow their next generation to have the same opportunity to raise a family rural, to be able to create crops, and to be able to feed the world. And so I love the fact that most all farms are family owned. For that very reason, I do think they care a little more.
Mm-hmm. Well, this might be an extreme situation, but what if no one in the next generation wants that job? I know it's happened, but the opposite of that might be that there are several of the offspring that want the job.
Yeah, it happens both ways. I think there was a time when agriculture was tough, at least specifically in the 80s, where every parent in the United States was saying, go get an education, go do something else, something safer, something that has benefits.
More predictable.
More predictable. And that's changed, obviously, with over the last 5 or so years, because agriculture's been so good. Now there's room, now there's profitability, now there's opportunity for the next generation, and so that's changed a little bit.
But children, I think, still go to college in the farming world, because the world of farming is so today based on science and technology. One has to basically be educated to understand all that, don't they? And lead that.
Yeah, absolutely. The farm today is so technologically advanced.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's how seeds get planted, how a tractor goes from one end of the field to the other. Frankly, the farmers are not even steering the tractors through the field anymore. They get to the end of the road and have to turn it around, but GPS. And so, yeah, the next generation needs to go to school, or at least get the training that will allow them to be competitive going forward, because technology is just going to continue to influence farming, I think, in a very positive way. But we need our next generation. The senior generation needs the next generation to fill some of those gaps where they may not be as talented at. So I think it's a perfect opportunity for the next generation to figure out how to become valuable to the farm. And by going out, getting skills, whether that's in a formal ag education setting or working off the farm, and then bringing those skills back to the ag operation, they can then find their place, they can be valuable from day one, and that's the ideal situation for every farm transition.
Mhm.
Now, is that where perhaps some of the strong, we have very strong ones around here, the 4-H and FFA programs, do they, I know that I'm largely exposed to it like a lot of us are with the animals and the exhibits and everything at the fairs, but do the 4-H and FFA programs, do they put an emphasis on the farming aspect of things? Because I know there's a lot of agricultural elements, but what are you aware, do they have programs that encourage kids to get involved in, or especially if they're in a family farm, to carry that on?
I think 4-H and FFA does a great job of leveraging agriculture to teach the next generation important lessons, to teach them important skills, whether that's leadership skills or communication skills. And I think one of the things that's really good about 4-H and FFA is that they don't assume that everyone in 4-H or FFA wants to go back to their family farm. They're just using those programs to make them better, and they can leverage those skills in whatever profession they choose. So I don't know if they're specifically aimed at, pointing that next generation back to the family farm, but certainly they're complementary to it, that's for sure.
A lot of people are involved in 4-H that maybe don't have any farming background, or they don't actually live on a big farm. So what is the biggest threat to the generational transition from your perspective?
If you were to ask a farmer, they may say regulation, they may say taxes, but ultimately I think that one of the biggest challenges is communication, and that goes both ways. The senior generation communicating what their expectations and intentions are to the next generation, whether that's expectations for cash flow during their quote-unquote retirement years, even though farmers never retire, or the expectations of the next generation coming back, saying, look, if we come back and we're going to bring a family here, we need to know, what's the path to ownership. We need to know what's the path to being able to make meaningful decisions in the operation. We're not going to be farm hands only for the rest of our life. And so I think that is the biggest threat, is lack of communication going both ways with the generations. I think that although there are tough issues with regulations, although taxes can be a real challenge for some of these generational operations, I think communication is the number one issue that is going to keep some farms from being passed down in the same family.
So I know that you're involved in basically a private business. Not only are you an author, but what is the name of that business?
It's called Advising Generations.
Advising Generations. And a farming family calls you up, or the senior members of that, and what can they get from you? How does that work?
Yeah. So Advising Generations was set up to be able to help families in three different ways. One is to educate them. Some families aren't ready to make decisions on what they're going to do, and so I do a lot of speaking, I do a lot of writing. I taught at the University of Nebraska, so that's the first one, is education. The second one is advising them, and so that kind of goes down to the next level of a family will finally raise their hand and say, all right, we appreciate the education, but now we need help on our specific issues, and I'll be called in to work specifically with a family on their management or ownership transitions, or setting up a governance structure that will allow them to move forward. So that's advice, but then the third one is implementation. Many of these families go to workshops every single winter and hear about succession planning, but unless they actually get advice on their specific situation and implement that advice, we haven't done a great job for them. And so that's really why Advising Generations was created. And there's a whole host of technology tools and processes that are being developed, that have been developed. The Inspired Questions for Farmers app is one. Generational Business 360 process is another. And so I'm really just about creating processes that will help families and also help advisors to have this process be more intuitive, because I think many can just get frustrated, throw their hands up, and kind of give up on the process.
Well, you sound partially like a counselor.
Yeah, I probably should have gotten a counseling degree.
Yeah.
It probably would help me.
All right, but you have the backbone of the finances to help that too. All right, so you have a gift that you're making available to people today. Go ahead and tell folks about it if you would.
Sure. The Inspired Questions for Farmers app is available on the App Store for all Apple devices. And if you send a text message to 33733 and text the word farming, that's 33733, and text the word farming, we'll send you a link to the app so you can download it for free and have it as a tool for your family to be able to start some of these tough conversations.
Okay. Give me a couple of examples of these tough conversations, or not the conversation per se, but a question that could inspire some conversation.
Sure. Let me get you my favorite one here.
He's working on his app right now. He's on his phone. Okay.
All right. One question I love for the next generation is, what's your comfort level having to personally guarantee the debt of the family farm?
Mm-hmm.
That's a question that I want every family to ask their next generation before they put their estate plan together. Because many times families will think that shared ownership is the right thing to do with the family farm. But if I'm not participating in the operation, but I am going to be asked to personally guarantee the debt of the farm so that my sister or my brother can farm, I'm not sure I'm comfortable with that. And so it's that type of question that needs to be asked, so the parents can then make a good decision as to should we force them into shared ownership or not.
Mm-hmm. Well, one of the chapters has to do with all the various kinds of arrangements that people can have. So there could be someone who, a child who lives on the farm with their family and does the farming, but there could be other co-owners. They don't live on the farm. Maybe they live, as you listed here, in Chicago and have an office job. Wow, the complications are just immense.
They are, and so part of the book is to help give them a framework for thinking about why do certain family members have certain questions, and what are the questions of those people that fit into those categories. So take, for instance, someone that is a family member of the controlling owner family, has some ownership but doesn't work on the farm. They have a whole different set of questions. They want to know about, is it being managed properly? Is there any cash flow that's going to come to them?
Mm-hmm.
Are there any liabilities that might come back to them if it's not managed properly? And then you look at a different group, a group that owns, controls, and is a family member, and they have a different set of questions. And so that's, again, I try to put the framework in the book as to help those people know, why the hair on the back of your neck stands up when you ask certain questions, and it all depends on kind of where you fit in that model.
Mm-hmm. Very complicated for those people. Where can we find the book that is, again, called The Farm Whisperer?
Yeah, so the book's available on Amazon.com for $19.95,
Mm-hmm.
and that's pretty much how you get it.
All
If you're
right.
local to the area, I guess and you wanted a signed copy, you could reach out to me specifically, or directly, but yeah, Amazon.com.
What's been the reaction to the book? And this book is available obviously nationwide. I mean, we're not the only farming community here.
Yeah, it's been an amazing reaction. Actually, last week I was in South Dakota and Nebraska, did an event for young and beginning farmers and ranchers in South Dakota, then did the Nebraska Cattleman Show, and then did an event for a private bank. I have other events, the National Farm Bureau Convention in Orlando, Florida, conferences in Texas, and so yeah, this book has really, I guess, become a tool for conference organizers to help their farm audience to begin to think about these things.
Mm-hmm. What keeps you awake at night when it relates to family farms?
What keeps me awake at night?
Do you farm right now?
I don't.
Do you live in Basin City? In the city? Or do you live rurally?
In the big city of Basin City. The heart of downtown Basin City.
Wow, okay.
So I think we're 900, right?
I don't know.
I mean, it's big
Sounds
city.
good. Okay.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So no, I don't farm. I travel all over the country with the consulting and speaking that I do, so
Mm-hmm.
which is a blessing. It allows me to live where we want to live, and we love living in Basin City in a small town, and get to help families all over the country.
Very interesting. All right. Dave, thank you so much. The Farm Whisperer, I really appreciate your time with us today and the knowledge that you have shared, and people can look you up. Just Google him and you'll come across a way to contact him if that is something that is of interest to you. We're back in a moment here on Meet in the Middle.